My husband spent 5 nights in a honeymoon suite with another woman and booked it using my employee discount. He didn't know I could see every reservation in the system. He didn't know I'd already found the $23,000 he'd drained from our savings. And when he walked through that front door, tanned and smiling, ready to tell me he wanted a divorce, he didn't know I'd been sitting at that kitchen table for 20 minutes with a manila folder and absolutely nothing left to count. Lose. The heavy oak door clicked shut. Metal keys hit the granite counter. He threw them. He always threw his keys. Heavy footsteps slapped against the Spanish tile. Grant stood in the kitchen. He brought the restless energy of a man who had practiced his speech in the rearview mirror. He wore a seafoam green polo shirt I had never seen before. The smell of coconut, sunscreen, and stale airplane air clung tightly to his collar. Vivid tan lines wrapped around his left wrist, right where his expensive watch usually sat. He did not sit down. He stood by the kitchen island, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked exactly like a regional manager about to deliver a poor quarterly review. I sat at the table. My hands rested flat against the wood. I traced the familiar grain with my thumbnail. A thick manila folder sat in front of the empty chair across from me. "Shelby, I am tired." His voice was smooth, deep. "I am tired of this. Of us. I think we should get a divorce." He paused. He waited for the tears. He waited for the woman he had known for 12 years. The woman who smoothed things over. The woman who apologized when he bumped into her. He expected me to shatter. I did not. "Okay," I said. He blinked, his arms uncrossed, dropping loosely to his sides. "Okay, the papers are on the table." He looked down at the folder. He picked the thick stack of paper up. He opened the cover. I watched the blood drain out of his face. The color vanished from his cheeks, leaving his skin the shade of old parchment. The muscle in his jaw ticked. "Once? Twice? What is this?" he asked. His voice sounded thin. The southern charm had evaporated completely. "Read it." I watched him read. I studied him the exact same way I studied a difficult guest screaming at the front desk. Professional. Detached. 12 years of reading rooms, and this was the very first time I had bothered to read one for myself. He looked up at me. For the first time in a decade, he really looked at me. He saw someone he did not recognize. He took a slow half-step backward. 10 days earlier, I was still a woman who ironed his shirts. I am 42 years old, and I am the operations manager at the Oglethorpe Grand. This hotel is my domain. It was a normal Tuesday morning. The muted hum of the lobby filtered through my solid wood office door. Brass luggage carts rumbled over Italian marble floors. The concierge phone rang twice before someone answered it. A saxophone played softly from the overhead speakers. We always played Coltrane before noon. My desk was perfectly organized. 2 wide monitors glowed brightly. A framed photograph sat near my ceramic pen cup. It was a picture of Grant and me at our 10th anniversary dinner. His arm was draped over my shoulder. My smile looked tight, completely automatic. The sharp scent of burnt Keurig coffee drifted in from the hallway, mixing with the crisp, dry chill of the hotel air conditioning. My fingers clicked the heavy plastic mouse. I tapped the keyboard. It was the ordinary, comfortable rhythm of a standard workday. I reviewed the cross-property bookings for Heritage South Hospitality. Our company managed 6 luxury properties across Georgia and South Carolina. My morning routine meant checking for VIP reservations, monitoring rate anomalies, and approving employee discount usage. A red flag popped up on the second monitor. An employee discount code had been applied to a reservation at Palmetto Bluff. That was our sister property down in Hilton Head. I leaned closer to the screen. Guest name, Grant Holloway. Room honeymoon suite. Check-in Thursday. Exactly 4 days from now. Check out the following Tuesday. I scrolled down to the occupancy details. Second. Guest. Registered C. Renault. The room tilted. It was not a violent shift. It was the subtle, disorienting slide of a picture frame being knocked slightly off-center. I read the glowing screen again. Grant Holloway, honeymoon suite. C. Renaud. I mouthed the name to the empty office. It felt familiar. It felt wrong, like hearing a familiar song played slightly off-key. Then my memory caught the thread. Renaud, Cheryl Renaud. I had seen her name printed on the billing invoices for Magnolia Table Catering Grant's business. She was the young freelance event coordinator he hired for the massive Beaumont wedding last spring. I remembered her. She wore a yellow sundress and laughed too loudly at every single joke Grant made. Opening a new tab, I pulled up my personal calendar. Grant had told me over dinner that he was attending the Southeast Catering Association conference in Charleston, Thursday through Tuesday. I opened a third browser tab and typed in the association's web address. I scanned their event schedule for the year. There was no conference listed for those dates. The last one had taken place in March, up in Atlanta. I clicked back to the booking system. Honeymoon suite. He used an employee discount. He used my discount. The code was linked directly to my personal employee identification number. I had given it to him 3 years ago for a family weekend trip to the coast. A trip we never actually took because he was always too busy. He was using my own employee discount to book a luxury suite with another woman. Leaning back in my ergonomic leather chair, my hands felt cold. Very cold. I did not cry. My breath did not catch in my throat. I sat with the information the exact same way I sat with a 2 a.m. fire alarm when it turned out to be a false trigger. I assessed the situation. I cataloged the facts. I decided what needed to happen next. Later, I would wonder why the tears never came. Right now, I only felt the icy clarity of an auditor finding a fraudulent charge. Pressing the keyboard shortcuts, I took a screenshot of the entire booking page. I saved the image directly to my personal cloud drive. I closed the browser window entirely. Opening my digital calendar, I counted the days. 4 days remained until Grant left for his supposed catering conference. 4 days to figure out who I was going to be when he returned. I drove my sedan straight to Tess's neighborhood after my shift ended. She is my younger sister, 38 years old and an emergency room nurse at Memorial Health. I did not call her first. If I called her, I knew I would lose my nerve and drive home to cook dinner. Pushing open her front door, the smell of reheated frozen lasagna hit me immediately. The loud, cartoonish voices of SpongeBob SquarePants blared from the living room television. My 9-year-old nephew Kyle sat cross-legged on the rug. Tess stood at the kitchen island. She was pouring apple juice into a mismatched plastic cup. She looked up at me. Her eyes narrowed instantly. She possessed the brutal triage instinct of an emergency room nurse. She could read a crisis before anyone opened their mouth. "What happened?" she asked. Walking to the counter, I pulled my phone from my purse. I opened the cloud drive, found the saved screenshot, and slid the device across the speckled countertop. Tess wiped her hands on a damp dish towel. She picked up the phone. She read the screen. I watched her face carefully. I expected surprise. I got pure, white-hot fury instead. "That son of a bitch!" she hissed, keeping her voice low so Kyle would not hear. She set the phone down hard. "That absolute bastard." She looked at me. The anger in her eyes shifted into something sharper. Something directed entirely at me. "Shelby, the perfume on his collar 4 months ago." "I do not know what you mean," I said. "Yes, you do." She stepped closer. "You knew. Part of you already knew. 4 months ago, I was doing the laundry. I picked up his blue button-down shirt. The smell of Chanel No. 5 hit me. It was heavy, floral, expensive. I wear unscented lotion because strong smells give me terrible headaches. I held the shirt. I smelled it. Then I put it in the washing machine. I poured extra detergent. I washed it away. I never asked. I did not know, I said. My voice sounded thin, barely above a whisper. I just didn't ask. That is the exact same thing. We stood in heavy silence. The television hummed brightly in the other room. A neighbor's dog barked 2 houses down. "What are you going to do?" Tess asked. I do not know yet. I need to think. Tess slammed her hand flat against the counter. The plastic cup jumped. Juice sloshed over the rim. Do not do that. Do not dare tell me you are going to pretend nothing happened. Do not dare Jean Fraser this. My jaw ached. I had been grinding my teeth since 3 o'clock this afternoon. Jean Fraser was our mother, a woman who ran a diner and smiled through a miserable marriage until the day our father walked out for good. You spent 12 years taking care of that man like he was a preferred guest in your hotel, Tess said. Her voice was ruthless. Necessary. When are you going to check yourself in? My first instinct, the one buried deep in my bones, was to drive back to my house, to confront Grant, to force him to explain himself, to give him a chance to apologize and fix the broken thing between us. I wanted to hear his voice soften. I wanted him to tell me it was a huge mistake. Tess watched my face. She shook her head slowly. He will not fix it, Shelby. If you confront him now, he is going to manage you. He will spin it. She was right. He sold expensive catering packages to nervous brides for a living. He could talk his way out of a locked bank vault. I picked up my phone. The screen was still bright with the reservation details. I made my decision right then. I would not confront him. Not yet. I would not serve him an easy way out. I would investigate. I would watch. Grant would leave for Charleston in exactly 4 days. The clock had started ticking. I needed to be ready. I did not go to bed when I finally drove home from my sister's house that night. Grant had texted earlier to say he was working late on a catering proposal. I knew exactly what working late meant now. I sat at the kitchen table. The house felt entirely hollow. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the refrigerator. The cold rim of my ceramic coffee mug rested against my palm. The harsh blue light of my laptop screen illuminated the dark kitchen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Grant always insisted on handling our big-picture finances. He called it his responsibility. I managed the groceries, the utility bills, and my own credit card. I never looked closely at our joint savings account because I had no reason to doubt him. I looked closely now. The cursor blinked steadily against the white background. I pulled up the statements from the past 8 months. 14 individual transfers stared back at me. $23,400 had been moved from our joint savings into his personal checking account. The amounts were carefully calculated. $1,500 here, $3,500 there. Small enough to avoid triggering any fraud alerts, but large enough to build a secret life. I should have checked the bank statements months ago. I did not. I traced where the money went. I found charges for boutique hotels on Tybee Island, a jewelry purchase on Broughton Street for $2,800. I received a kitchen blender for Christmas, so I knew the expensive earrings were not for me. Dinner for 2 at La Scala for $187. The hotel manager inside me took over completely. I documented every single line item. I took screenshots. I built a detailed spreadsheet. For over a decade, I had built paper trails for insurance claims, difficult guest complaints, and employee disputes. This time the claim was my own. There was a sick, quiet satisfaction in organizing the chaos. It felt exactly like solving a complicated booking discrepancy at the front desk. Order pulled from the mess, but beneath that professional satisfaction, my chest burned. Every receipt was a knife. A date night that belonged to my marriage, handed to someone else. Friday morning arrived. Grant packed his leather overnight bag, kissed my cheek, and drove away to his imaginary conference. I did not go to the hotel for my shift. I drove downtown to a brick building on Bay Street. Tess had recommended Joe Callahan. Joe was a divorce attorney with sharp eyes and a heavy oak desk piled high with thick folders. She listened to my story without interrupting once. She laid out the reality of Georgia law. Our state allows fault-based divorce. Adultery is a specific legal ground. If I could prove he cheated, he would be completely barred from receiving any alimony. She explained the concept of equitable distribution. The court focused on fair, not equal. Because Grant had spent over $20,000 on an affair, it was considered a dissipation of marital assets. The court would compensate me with a disproportionate share of whatever money remained. You are a hotel manager who caught her husband booking a honeymoon suite on her own corporate system, Joe said. She leaned back in her leather chair and crossed her arms. Honey, this case writes itself. She added one more crucial detail. Georgia is a one-party consent state. I could record any conversation with Grant without his knowledge or permission. I signed the heavy retainer agreement. Her assistant handed me a copy to keep. I did not file the petition yet. I wanted every single piece of evidence compiled first. I thought, knowing the law was enough to protect me, I would find out later how wrong I was. Sunday evening crept into the house. Grant had been in Hilton Head for 3 days. The weekend silence felt suffocating. The kitchen clock ticked loudly above the stove. A neighbor's dog barked twice, then stopped abruptly. I sat at the exact same kitchen table. My laptop was open. A legal pad sat right next to my hand. The manila folder was already growing thick with printed documents. I picked up my pen. I clicked the cap. Once, twice. The nervous energy needed somewhere to go. The smell of spicy peanut sauce drifted from the Thai takeout container I had picked up on Drayton Street. I never cooked when Grant traveled. It was my one quiet rebellion. I reviewed my handwritten notes. Something nagged at the back of my mind. The name on the hotel reservation. C. Renaud. I recognized the last name from his catering invoices. But there was something else. A detail floating just out of reach. I opened my email archive. I searched the name. A forwarded message from Grant appeared on the screen. It was 9 months old. It discussed a massive wedding contract for the following spring. 2 people were copied on the email. Len Renaud, Grant's older business partner, and Cheryl Renaud. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I opened a search engine. I typed her name. A professional networking profile loaded instantly. Cheryl Renaud, event coordinator in Savannah. Education listed as the University of Georgia. I scrolled down to her connections. Len Renaud was listed right there. The tag next to his name read, Father. The floor did not drop out beneath me. It completely reconfigured. Grant was not just having a random affair. He was sleeping with his business partner's daughter. Len Renaud was a quiet, principled man who believed in old-school handshake deals. He trusted Grant. They had shared a successful catering business for 8 years. The betrayal suddenly had a second victim, and that victim had a face. I picked up my phone. I scrolled to Len's number in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the glowing screen. This would be the hardest phone call of my life. Far harder than the one I would never make to Grant. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. Mr. Renaud, this is Shelby, Grant's wife. Shelby, his voice sounded warm and slightly confused. We had stood next to each other at company barbecues and holiday parties for years. Is everything all right? No, sir, it is not. I gripped the edge of the wooden table. I need to tell you something about Grant and your daughter. And I am sorry. I am so incredibly sorry that I have to be the one to do it. A long, heavy silence filled the line. It was the specific kind of pause that meant he already half knew. Tell me, he said. The warmth was entirely gone. I told him everything. The booking system flag, the dates, the honeymoon suite at Palmetto Bluff, the name registered as the second guest. Len did not interrupt me. He breathed slowly into the receiver. How long? He finally asked. At least 8 months, I said. Based on the bank records I found. 8 months. His voice cracked slightly. That is when she started coming around the office more often. Len thanked me. His tone held no anger toward me. It held something far worse. It was the devastating sound of a father realizing his only daughter had been seduced by a man he trusted with his livelihood. "I will handle this," Len said quietly. "You take care of yourself, Shelby." He hung up the phone. I sat in the dark kitchen. A new feeling washed over me. It was a sensation I had not experienced in over a decade. Power. It was not Grant's kind of power. It was not loud or charming or demanding. It was the quiet, absolute power of someone who had just lit a very long fuse and knew exactly where it led. Grant's business partner knew the truth. The dominoes were perfectly set. When Grant walked through the front door on Friday, he would not just face a simple divorce. He would face the collapse of his entire professional world. For 45 minutes, I felt completely invincible. I felt like I was finally the one running the show. 12 years of folding napkins and saying yes, dear, and checking other people into beautiful rooms had led to this one perfect moment of control. I did not notice it yet. I was doing it again. I was managing everyone else, just managing a much bigger hotel. Grant was coming home in 5 days. Len was about to confront his daughter. The dominoes were falling. I just assumed they were falling in my direction. My phone buzzed against the wooden nightstand on Monday evening. The bright screen illuminated the dark bedroom. Grant was calling. I answered the call and pressed the cold glass to my ear. His voice poured through the tiny speaker. It was warm, charming, and entirely smooth. "Hey, darlin'," he said. "I miss you. The weather has been absolutely beautiful down here." He painted a picture of a spectacular sunset over the water. He complained loudly that the catering conference was an absolute snooze. He claimed he had met some excellent business contacts during the boring seminars. He promised he was bringing me a box of handmade pralines from that little sugar shop I liked on the boardwalk. I played along perfectly. My tone remained perfectly steady. "That sounds very nice," I said. "I cannot wait to have you home." My voice did not crack once. I hung up the phone. The room plunged back into silence. I walked into the master bathroom and stared at my own reflection in the vanity mirror for 3 solid minutes. My chest felt completely hollow, because for 12 seconds during that phone call, I actually believed him. There were 12 seconds where his warm, familiar voice felt completely real. 12 seconds where Hilton Head was just a boring conference and the name on that reservation was just a simple clerical error. Muscle memory is a terrifying thing. 12 years of believing his charming lies was a very hard habit to break. Tuesday brought thick, suffocating humidity to Savannah. Tess drove over immediately after her nursing shift at the hospital. We sat together in her parked sedan in my driveway. The engine was off. We cracked the windows to let the heavy evening air inside. Thick veils of Spanish moss hung perfectly still from the ancient oak tree in my front yard. The cicadas were already starting their loud, buzzing chorus in the fading light. Tess gripped the steering wheel tightly. She had been thinking all day. She was deeply worried. "What if Len does not follow through?" she asked. "He said he would handle it," I replied. My voice lacked conviction. "He said he would handle his daughter. That is very different from handling Grant." I looked at her profile in the dim light. "What do you mean? I mean, what if he talks to Cheryl, and Cheryl cries?" Tess turned in her seat to face me. "What if she says she did not know he was married? What if Len forgives her and blames Grant, but does not actually do anything about the catering business? They have active contracts and money tied up. Business is complicated, Shelby. Men protect their money." I stared out the windshield at my own dark house. I had no answer for her. "Shelby, you built your entire revenge plan around a 62-year-old man doing exactly what you want him to do. That is not a solid plan. That is a prayer." She pushed harder. She asked what would happen if Grant had hidden bank accounts. She asked what would happen if he moved the money out of state before I filed the legal paperwork. She asked if I had considered that he might have already spoken to a lawyer himself. I had not considered any of those possibilities. I had been entirely focused on the perfect domino effect of Len finding out. I assumed the universe would simply hand me justice. Tess let out a long, frustrated breath. You are doing it again. You are managing everyone else in their crisis. You are managing Len. You are managing Grant. You are even managing Cheryl. When are you going to manage your own crisis? I did not answer her. The streetlights flickered on above us. The word landed heavily in my chest. Managing. The call came on Wednesday afternoon. I sat at the desk in my home office. Len sounded incredibly tired when I answered. It was the specific bone-deep exhaustion of an aging father who could not protect his child. He had confronted Cheryl that morning. She had broken down completely in his office. She swore Grant had told her we were legally separated. Grant told her we were actively filing for divorce and just had not finalized the tedious paperwork yet. She even showed Len the text messages from Grant confirming this elaborate story. Cheryl genuinely believed she was dating a man who was leaving his unhappy wife, not a man who was actively cheating on her. She was devastated. She did not know, Shelby, Len said softly. My little girl did not know. I understand, I told him. I am absolutely furious at Grant. I want to put him through a brick wall. But my hands are tied. But what I asked, the cold feeling started in my stomach. I cannot dissolve the business just based on this personal betrayal. We have 3 active catering contracts. The Beaumont Parker wedding is next month. The Chatham Club quarterly dinner is right after that. I have 6 loyal employees who depend on their weekly paychecks to feed their families. If I blow this up right now, they suffer the consequences. I cannot do that to them, so he gets away with it. He does not get away with anything. I am going to extract myself from the partnership, but it takes time. We have a partnership agreement, a strict buyout clause, and a transition period. Weeks, maybe 2 months. My attorney is looking at the conduct clause right now. These things must go through the proper legal channels or Grant and his lawyers will tear the dissolution apart in court. Grant comes home in 2 days? I know. I am sorry. I wish I could give you what you need. I hung up the receiver. The grand plan evaporated into the stale air of my office. The beautiful cascading dominoes of total destruction were completely gone. Len would dissolve the business eventually. But not right now. Not on my timeline. Not the simultaneous explosion I had choreographed in my head. Grant would not come home to a burning empire. He would come home to a standard divorce petition and some highlighted bank statements. That was it. The reality of just a divorce sat heavy in my chest like swallowed glass. I had wanted a massive spectacle. I had wanted Grant to walk through that front door and find his entire world dismantled exactly the way he had dismantled mine. I wanted the destruction to be strictly proportional to the betrayal. Now I had to settle for something smaller. Something ordinary, something that felt exactly like losing again. I did not plan to go there. I drove past my own dark house on Wednesday night and simply kept driving. My sedan pulled into the hotel parking lot near midnight. I walked in through the heavy glass staff entrance because it was the only door I had used in 5 years. I walked into the massive lobby of the Oglethorpe Grand. The decorative water fountain ran continuously in the center of the room. A distant elevator dinged softly on an upper floor. The overnight security guard walked his steady, circular, predictable route across the polished marble. His heavy boots echoed loudly in the cavernous space. The grand crystal chandeliers were dimmed to 30% power. The long mahogany front desk sat completely unmanned. Fresh floral arrangements near the entrance were wilting slightly in the humid indoor heat. The morning staff would change them at 6 o'clock. I sat down in one of the oversized leather armchairs. I looked exactly like a lost guest who had forgotten her room key. The lobby smelled like starched linen, lemonwood polish, and the lingering ghost of 100 different expensive perfumes. The leather armrest felt cool and smooth beneath my palm. My phone sat dark and silent in my lap. I sat in the lobby I managed. The beautiful space I had made absolutely perfect for 1,000 strangers over the years. I ensured decorative pillows were fluffed by 3 in the afternoon. I made sure every single returning guest was greeted by their first name upon arrival. I kept detailed, meticulous files on our regulars. Mr. Hensley took 2 sugar packets in his morning coffee and liked the Wall Street Journal held directly at the front desk. Mrs. Castellano required a hypoallergenic pillow. The Bradshaw family always received room 312 because their young daughter loved the oversized bathtub. I knew exactly what everyone needed. I had always known. When was the last time someone asked what I needed? The question arrived not as words, but as a crushing physical weight. It was the kind of heavy exhaustion that forces you to lean forward in a chair because sitting up straight simply costs too much energy. My spine bowed. I stared at the geometric patterns in the expensive rug. 12 years. 12 long years of telling Grant I would handle it. I carried his shifting moods like heavy luggage. I made his breakfast. I made endless excuses for his bad behavior. I kept the fragile peace in our home. I scheduled my own fundamental needs around everyone else and their checkout times. I thought about my mother. I saw Jean Fraser standing in her empty diner at midnight, endlessly folding cloth napkins. If the customers are happy, we are happy. I was 13 years old, standing there with white flour dusted across my apron, and I believed her completely. I believed that providing good service was the exact same thing as providing love. I believed that if you made yourself useful enough, people would stay. Except my father did not stay. He left when I was 9 years old. He did not leave because my mother was not useful. Jean was the most useful woman in our entire rural town. He left because being useful is not the same thing as being loved. I had spent 30 years confusing the two concepts. I had built my entire marriage on that single misunderstanding. The desperate want inside me dissolved completely. It did not vanish with high drama. It faded with profound exhaustion. I had wanted to destroy Grant. He certainly deserved it. But I realized I needed the destruction to be massive to prove that I actually mattered. If Grant lost everything, then what he did to me must have mattered. I believed the scale of his punishment equaled the scale of my personal value. I was still measuring my own worth by his reactions. I did not need Grant to lose everything. I needed to stop being everyone's concierge. The fountain kept running. The security guard passed by my chair again. I sat in the lobby of my own luxury hotel, resting in a leather armchair, meant only for paying guests. For the very first time in my adult life, I was not working. I was not managing. I was not serving. I was just sitting. I picked up my phone. I opened the message thread with Tess. My thumbs moved quickly across the glass screen. I know what I am going to do. I sat across from Joe Callahan on Thursday morning. The heavy oak desk felt familiar now. My new plan was remarkably simple. It was incredibly clean. There were no elaborate dominoes falling in slow motion. There was no managing other people and their unpredictable actions. I instructed Joe to file a divorce petition based on fault-citing adultery under Georgia law. We attached the hotel booking confirmation. We attached the printed bank statements highlighting the $23,400 of dissipated marital assets. I claimed my disproportionate share. Grant was legally barred from seeking alimony. Joe looked at me over her reading glasses. She asked if I was sure I did not want to wait to see if Len acted first. I told her I was not waiting for anyone. I did not need Len and his domino anymore. I did not need Grant to lose his entire catering business to feel validated. I just needed Grant to know that I saw him clearly and that I finally chose myself. I drove back to my quiet house. I slid the thick stack of papers into a crisp manila folder. I set it precisely in the center of the kitchen table. One chair sat empty. One chair waited for me. Tomorrow was Friday. The sound of a car engine cutting off broke the Friday evening silence. A heavy car door slammed shut in the driveway. I heard the trunk pop open. Grant was pulling out the expensive leather luggage he had packed for a romantic trip with another woman. The front door handle clicked. He tossed his keys onto the granite counter. They hit the stone with a sharp, familiar clatter. I sat perfectly still at the kitchen table. The manila folder rested directly under my fingertips. A single glass of ice water sat next to it. The evening sun filtered through the window blinds, turning the entire room a deep, warm amber. For the very first time in 12 years, there was no hot meal waiting on the stove. The kitchen simply smelled of clean granite and citrus dish soap. The smooth paper of the folder felt cool and final beneath my hands. Grant walked into the kitchen. He looked deeply tanned. He looked incredibly smug. He wore a new seafoam green polo shirt. He dropped his bag by the hallway entrance and did not lean in to kiss my cheek. He stood near the kitchen island, keeping a deliberate physical distance between us. It was the exact posture of a manager preparing to deliver a poor performance review. "Shelby, sit down," he said. "I am sitting." "Right." He crossed his arms over his chest. "Look, I have been thinking a lot. About us. About what I really want." "What do you want, Grant?" He took a deep breath. It sounded completely rehearsed. The generous tone of a wealthy man giving charity to the poor. "I am tired, Shelby. I am tired of this. Of coming home to this. I think we should get a divorce. I think it is the right thing. For both of us." "Okay," I said. His practiced script shattered instantly. His arms dropped. "Okay, the papers are on the table." He looked down at the folder. He picked it up slowly. He opened the cover. His eyes darted across the bold legal text. His jaw tightened visibly. "What is this?" he asked. "Keep reading." He turned the first page. The divorce petition citing adultery. He turned the second page. The Heritage South Hospitality booking confirmation. Palmetto Bluff. Hilton Head. The honeymoon suite. Employee discount code 4471. My personal employee number. Second guest registered as C. Renaud. The blood drained completely from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor behind. The thick flush of his vacation tan vanished. His neck broke out in a bright red rash. He turned another page. The highlighted bank statements. 14 individual transfers, $23,400. Itemized receipts for boutique hotels, expensive jewelry, and high-end restaurants. The legal dissipation claim attached right behind them. I watched him crumble. I felt incredibly calm. It was not the icy, detached calm I had felt 10 days ago. It was the profound peace of a woman who was no longer performing for an audience. I did not need to see him destroyed anymore. I did not need the spectacular fiery collapse I had obsessed over. I only needed him to read the absolute truth and to know that I had read it first. Then, his shaking fingers turned to the very last page. This was the one part of the folder I had not planned. It was the fallen domino I had completely given up on controlling. A sealed envelope had been hand-delivered to my front porch that morning. It contained a letter from Len Renaud. Len had not dissolved the catering business overnight, but he had done something far more precise. The letter was a formal legal notice of his intent to invoke Section 14 of the Magnolia Table Partnership Agreement. It detailed the immediate dissolution of their business partnership on the grounds of conduct materially detrimental to the reputation and operations of the company. It was effective in 30 days, pending a mandatory buyout negotiation. Len had done it. He did not do it on my rushed timeline. He did it on his own terms, in his own way. Grant stared at the letter. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a ledge in the dark. He had walked into this house fully expecting the divorce to be his ultimate power play. He wanted to walk in, declare he was tired, and walk out as the tragic hero of his own story. Instead, I was already standing at the door before he even reached for the handle, and Len, Len, the man he golfed with every weekend. Len, the man he trusted. Len, the father of the young woman he had manipulated. Shelby. Grant swallowed hard. His voice trembled. Wait, we can talk about this. We just did. He cycled through the stages of panic with terrifying speed. First came the aggressive denial. He told me the documents were insane and completely fabricated. Then came the explosive anger. He shouted that I had gone behind his back to poison Len against him. When the anger failed to move me, the desperate bargaining began. He promised we could fix the marriage. He promised he would end the affair immediately because it meant absolutely nothing to him. Finally, he sank into profound self-pity. He leaned heavily against the granite island and cried about everything he had built for us. I noted his emotional shifts with clinical detachment. He hit every single stage of grief and manipulation in under 4 minutes. He was highly efficient even in his absolute desperation. I stood up from the wooden chair. I walked to the hallway closet and picked up the overnight bag I had packed yesterday afternoon. I did not respond to any of his pleas. I was not giving him the silent treatment as a punishment. There was simply nothing left to say. I had said every word using that thick folder. 12 years of unspoken grievances were filed, neatly tabbed and highlighted in bright yellow ink. I stopped at the front door. The house is marital property, I said quietly. Joe Callahan will be in contact with your attorney regarding the temporary court orders. I stepped out onto the porch. I did not slam the heavy oak door. I pulled it shut until the lock clicked. I closed it exactly the same way you close a hotel room door when you have finally checked out. The electronic lock beeped a sharp green note. The heavy wooden door pushed open. The profound quiet of a luxury hotel room at night wrapped around me instantly. The air conditioning unit hummed a low, steady rhythm. Muffled water sounds drifted through the sliding balcony glass. A heavy tugboat horn blew somewhere far down the river. I stood inside room 508 at the Oglethorpe Grand. The massive king bed was made perfectly with crisp military corners. I had personally trained the housekeeping staff on that exact technique. The thick white sheets were turned down neatly. A small, dark chocolate square rested perfectly centered on the fluffy pillow. The room smelled like bleached linen and the faint, sweet scent of magnolia blossoms drifting up from the courtyard below. I dropped my overnight bag onto the wooden luggage rack. The simple motion felt entirely alien. I was always the person putting other people's bags on the rack, metaphorically and physically. I sat on the edge of the mattress and ran my bare hand over the cool, textured duvet cover. Checking in at the front desk had felt surreal. Darnell was the 24-year-old night clerk I had hired 2 years ago. He had done a double take when I stood on the opposite side of the mahogany counter. He asked if I was actually checking in. I told him I needed the employee rate for a Riverview room for one single guest. He handed me the plastic key card with wide eyes. I rode the elevator to the 5th floor. Room 508 was the exact suite I always reserved for returning guests who mentioned they loved the soothing sound of the water. I had arranged this precise, luxurious experience for thousands of tired people. The evening turn-down service, the chocolate on the pillow, the thick white towels folded carefully into decorative fans. I had never once been on the receiving end of my own careful attention. A leather-bound room service menu sat on the writing desk. I had proofread that menu twice last month to find typographical errors. I had never actually ordered a meal from it. I picked up the landline phone and called the kitchen. I ordered a chilled glass of Sancerre and a hot plate of shrimp and grits. When the rolling cart arrived, I carried the heavy ceramic plate out onto the private balcony. The wide Savannah River moved slowly below me, in the absolute dark, reflecting the bright golden lights of the suspension bridge. Thick curtains of Spanish moss hung perfectly still from the live oaks in the courtyard. A young couple walked along the cobblestones of River Street, laughing brightly at a shared joke. The deep tugboat horn blew again. I sat in the padded iron chair and thought about everything I had just lost. I lost a marriage that had been empty for a very long time. I lost a beautiful house, at least temporarily, until the court sorted the assets. I lost a lifelong version of myself. I was incredibly glad she was gone. Then I thought about what I had kept. I kept Tess, who was probably sitting awake in her kitchen right now, waiting for a text message. I kept my career. I kept my unshakable competence. I kept my ridiculous, wonderful talent for remembering that Mr. Hensley took exactly 2 sugar packets in his morning coffee. The shrimp and grits tasted incredible. I chewed slowly, savoring the rich, buttery sauce. I should tell the executive chef how good it is, I thought. Then I caught myself. Not tonight. Tonight I was not the operations manager. Tonight I was the guest. My mother's tired voice echoed in my memory one last time. If the customers are happy, we are happy. I sat on a hotel balcony I had supervised for 5 entire years, but had never actually enjoyed. I ate food I had served to hundreds of strangers, but had never tasted myself. I looked out at a river that had been flowing right beside me the entire time. I am the customer, I thought. I finished the cold white wine. I placed my empty dishes on the tray and set it outside my door for the night staff to collect. I closed the heavy blackout curtains, shutting out the bright bridge lights. I climbed into a massive bed that someone else had perfectly made. Tomorrow morning, there would be aggressive lawyers and endless stacks of paperwork. There would be desperate phone calls from Grant. There would be Tess sitting in my hotel room saying she told me so. There would be a new apartment to secure and an entirely new life to build from the ground up. Tomorrow, I would manage absolutely all of it. I would handle it because that is exactly who I am and I am exceptionally good at it. But tonight I was a preferred guest in my very own hotel. No one in the world needed a single thing from me. The deep rushing sound of the river felt like the exact opposite of silence. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. Have you ever found yourself managing someone else's life so perfectly that you completely forgot to live your own? To day 5. You fold the metaphorical napkins. You smooth over the rough edges. You anticipate every single need before they even have to ask. You convince yourself that this exhausting effort is exactly what true love looks like. It is incredibly easy to slip into the role of the permanent concierge in your own relationship. You tell yourself that if you just make things comfortable enough, if you make yourself absolutely indispensable, they will never want to leave you. But there is a very harsh truth hiding underneath all of those quiet sacrifices and perfectly fluffed pillows. Being incredibly useful to someone is not the exact same thing as being genuinely loved by them. When you spend your entire adult life serving someone else, you inevitably start to measure your own value by their reaction. You begin to think your personal worth is directly tied to how well you manage their shifting moods, their busy schedules, and their terrible mistakes. You carry their heavy emotional baggage because you think it proves how strong and devoted you are. But all it really does is exhaust you to your very core. You build a beautiful, comfortable hotel for them to live in, and you completely forget to reserve a room for yourself. When they inevitably take advantage of that deep comfort, when they use the very security you provided to tear your world apart, your first instinct is usually to fight back with massive, spectacular destruction. You want to orchestrate a perfect theatrical revenge because you desperately want the scale of their punishment to validate how much you actually mattered to them. But true power does not come from watching them fall apart. True power comes from the terrifying, beautiful moment when you simply stop performing for them. It happens when you look at the heavy luggage you have been carrying for a decade and you just drop it on the floor. You stop making the convenient excuses. You stop smoothing over the ugly, uncomfortable truths. You hand them the unvarnished reality of their own selfish choices, and you step completely out of their way. The ultimate revenge is rarely a fiery explosion. It is walking away with your dignity completely intact. It is realizing that you do not need their spectacular ruin to prove your own worth. Your personal value was never tied to how well you served them. Your value has belonged to you this entire time. It takes incredible courage to check out of a dynamic that has defined you for years. It is terrifying to sit in the absolute quiet and finally ask yourself what you actually need. Have you ever stayed in a bad situation far too long simply because you were terrified of what would happen if you stopped being the one holding everything together? Have you ever realized that the person you were breaking your back to, support, was actually taking your presence completely for granted? How did you find the deep strength to finally pack your bags and walk out the front door? Did you ever experience that profound, heavy moment of peace when you realized you were finally the guest in your own life? I would love to read your personal story in the comments section below. Please share your experiences because someone else reading right now might need the exact courage you finally found. You do not have to spend your entire life catering to people who only view you as a temporary convenience. You are fully allowed to sit down, take a deep breath, and finally enjoy the beautiful view for yourself.